this episode, I'm going to discuss everything about Cyclone Fina passing through the top end and what to do when your aircraft is stuck in severe weather. All that and more coming right up. So strap in and let's get into it.
Good morning, 7614, Alpha Mallow 7 POB with altitude.
Coordinating, Halen, I'm running bank power, bank pressure rolling at 30 degrees. That's 30 degrees there. Standby star 9000, 1013, K 525.
Is 9 News, first at 5.
Good afternoon. Tropical Cyclone Fina has lashed Darwin and regional areas.
But first to that intense storm bearing down on Darwin right now. The top end is feeling the powerful effects of Cyclone Fina.
G'day everybody and welcome to episode 189 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training and flying in Australia and beyond. I'm your host, Trent Robinson, and thank you for joining me for another windy, squally, stormy episode. Yes, Cyclone Fina has passed through Darwin. Thank goodness it wasn't a direct hit, as was possibly on the cards. It's one of those funny things, you know, you're kind of like, oh, wow, I'm going to get my first cyclone and this is going to be really amazing and cool, but also knowing it's going to be potentially incredibly dangerous and destructive. And there's that kind of mixed emotion of, oh, thank God it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but damn, what a bugger. It would have been kind of interesting. We're sick individuals, aren't we? But yeah, look, we're all okay. We've had a heap of trees down and palms and things. So it was on the chainsaw and big piles out the front. There's trees down the streets, leaf litter everywhere, but relatively minimal damage to property, which is good, and absolutely no injuries that I have heard of, which is even better. I think, everyone probably gets a little bit casual with these things sometimes. It's going to pass, it's not going to hit us. But, when it's like, yeah, actually, no, this is happening, it's time to knuckle down. So, look, I figured today is obviously the day just to talk about it all a little bit. For those that you've never experienced a cyclone yourself and wondering what it's all about, what it was like, I'll give you my account as best I can, and also from others that I've spoken to up here, because one thing was definitely certain, it was highly dependent on where you were and where you were located. So, look, we'll have a bit of a squiz, but before we do that, just a little bit on cyclones themselves and the naming convention. So you may not be aware, but the names are decided upon before the cyclone season approaches, and these are effectively decided upon by the Bureau of Met and the cyclones that are in their region anyway. And the names that they had picked were Fina, Grant, Haley, Iggy, Jenna, Koji, Luana, Mitchell, Narelle, Oren, and Peter. So a lot of people go, oh, they're always female names. Well, no, there was an even mix of male and female or non-gender specific names, however you want to approach them. And it does seem to be, however, though, that for the most part, the female ones are the ones that are most destructive. If we go back to Tracy, which is, of course, the one of the most famous ones and very still forever present in people's minds up here in Darwin, every time a cyclone does show up, it does stir emotional trauma for people that were here, and I totally get that when you look at the devastation that was caused. But these ones Tracy was actually a fairly small system. They weren't expecting it to do what it did. And this is, remember, 50 years ago, Christmas Eve, and then it hit Christmas morning rather nastily. So that happened in 1974. Then you've got Olivia, a cyclone that produced wind gusts of up to 408 kilometres per hour, which was recorded at Barrow Island, out off the northwest coast of Western Australia. That was in 1996. This is currently the world record for the strongest wind gust ever observed directly, which is like unbelievable winds. That's huge. Then you got Debbie, another powerful, severe tropical cyclone that hit the eastern Queensland area March 2017, which then resulted in flooding and rain in throughout southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. And if you remember all that, that was all pretty crazy. And Alfred, one for the boys, another slow-moving tropical cyclone, but that caused over $1 billion of damage and a lot of media attention, again, in the southeast Queensland earlier this year, or last year, sorry. That was, earlier this year. Haven't got to 2026 just yet, have we? It's not far off, though. So, those names, they get retired when they cause significant damage or loss of life. So if a cyclone name has been used, but it's thrown back in the mix, it didn't do a good enough job. All right. But back to Fina. So, look, we've just had the normal wet season, but it was said that we were going to be potentially having a bit of an early wet. And the conditions, have been hot and, muggy and that sort of thing, the normal stuff. But we have had a reasonable amount of shower activity. Nothing crazy, but it's definitely been up there for a wetter November than normal. And which honestly makes it nicer because whenever it rains, it helps bring the temp down and everything. So that's what we want. But a lot of saturated humidity. You can just about chew it. The air's pretty thick. But there was a big tropical low, which was identified, and that's what they were watching. It was only ever going to be small. It was very compact. And the tracking was going to go east, and then the idea was it was going to hit a trough line, which was just off the Coburg Peninsula there, which is basically what it hit and drove it back down to the southwest towards us in Darwin. But the weather itself, it was triggered partially as well by a negative Indian Ocean dipole, or the Indian Ocean version of the Pacific Ocean's La Nina or El Nino. In this case, it's La Nina, where it's pushing that warm water and the cold water, cooler waters in the western part of the ocean, push up the warm water, pushes it up to the surface. Good monsoonal flow from Indonesia and the equatorial regions there, and creates the perfect storm, as they say. So lots of fuel, lots of water, and this is what they were worried about because of the intensity over the Timor Sea and the idea of it then going Cat 3 when it crossed into the Gulf, which is basically the body of water between us and the TB Islands. And that is exactly what it did. It actually went Cat 1, backed off to Cat 1 for a little bit, and everyone sort of started to relax a bit, I think. But then it went Cat 2 and then back to Cat 3 overnight. And that's when everyone started taking things a bit more seriously. People that weren't going to pull down their shade sails started doing that and hitting up the shops. But, of course, the shelves were bare. It was like COVID all over again. And everyone knew then it was a real risk. So the reason, as I said, hitting that trough, bending it down, that's what was causing the confusion then as to where it would go. There was two lines of thought. There was the Bureau of Met were saying it was going to run pretty much between us, fairly equidistant between the Tiwis and Darwin. And then you had the JTWC, which is the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, which is the US Military Naval Weather Bureau, if you like. Was suggesting it was going to track a bit closer to Australia, a bit closer to the Darwin mainland. So why is the US military involved? Well, because they're monitoring waters and oceans all over the world, and that's what they do. Now, Bureau of Met pretty much nailed it, I reckon. Sometimes everybody gives them shit, but they were pretty much bang on with their tracking and exactly what happened and where. And even to the point where it was going to go Cat 4, it pushed out, and that's what it's doing right now, at least as of recording this. And we will see it should just start to dissipate as it hits the west or the eastern Kimberley sort of shoreline there before Truscott and Clumberoo and all that. so that's what basically happened. Big low pressure system. Now, as we know, the characteristics of a tropical cyclone, especially for pilots, is don't go flying. There was no flying happening yesterday. Pretty much all the flights cancelled, and we'll get to who did what in a minute. But yeah, obviously intense squalls, embedded thunderstorms, severe wind shifts, heavy blinding rainfall, and gusting winds, and sometimes winds that are like gusts but just remain at that capacity. Again, you imagine 200 kilometre hour winds, let alone the 400 odd that they got at Barrow Island. It's just huge. Now, the strongest winds are typically in the southern and the eastern quadrants, and that's really where Darwin was sitting, and that's why we had to be careful. There was real potential there for this to be a dangerous storm. Now, interestingly enough, in the morning, we were getting reports around 10 o'clock that houses are gone without power, and we're like, what? Like, how's that work? That was because where we are in the Darwin northern suburbs, the eastern suburbs were starting to get that southern and southeastern squall area, and that was taking out power and power lines. There's a lot of places in Darwin still that have above ground power. I'm very fortunate that I'm in a below ground power area, but that still didn't seem to save everybody. There were still homes in my area that went without power, and even talking to one of the aircraft owners whose power was out and the power was on next door. So I don't know how the power grids exactly work, but that'd annoy you, wouldn't it? But yeah, it was certainly just indiscriminate, and people have been without power for over 30 hours now. After Cyclone Marcus, which was 2018, people were without power for weeks. So there's a very big ongoing impact, as usually there is with these sort of things, that the storm itself is one thing, but the ongoing damage and damage to services and everything is long lasting. And that's really when I started wondering, oh man, should I have got a generator or not? How long is this going to last for? I've got the solar set up in the back of the car, so an inverter, so I knew we could run some things off that if we had to, but I'd have to keep turning the car on after a while to sort of keep up with the household power supply. It'd obviously be very limited in what we could run, let alone trying to run air conditioners. As it turned out, we've had some very cool weather. It's only been about 24 degrees, a bit humid, but bearable without the aircon and just the fans going, so that would be okay if we needed to. But yeah, certainly other people have been struggling without power. Some apartments have been without water because they haven't had the pumps to keep the water supply going, and then relocation of pets and everything else. So it can be very stressful, and definitely mindful of how fortunate we were there when just getting some damaged trees. So after the cyclone, obviously the tail end of it is still spinning. So whilst the main core passes, that's where we've got to be mindful of what's happening. But we had a very calm, sort of relaxed day for the most part. The day gradually got darker, got grayer. It built up until probably about 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock it started picking up, and that's where the southern squall line hit. Now, we didn't get a direct hit, very fortunate. Like I said, it was a Cat 3, but that was out over the water. It was a fairly small, compact cyclone. So the boundary to the Cat 3 and then the next section out of that, where we've got severe damaging winds to the squalls, was probably more Cat 2. And we probably got more of a Cat 1 kind of wind where we were, which was very fortunate because it just stayed out over the water and didn't come closer to Darwin City itself. The winds then, though, they were getting pretty wild, and there's nothing worse than hearing things hitting your roof and scraping. And but we settled in, and we were a little bit, I don't know, a bit sick, I guess. We put on Twister, started watching that, but then that got a bit too. It was a bit more of a 4D movie in the end. The movie was on, the twister scene where they're going through the drive-in movie happened to be on, and it really started arcing up outside, and you couldn't really tell what was going on. A bit of wind was pushing through the louvers and the windows. Bit of water was hitting my wife through the cracks, and then a bang. And what was that? And that's when we realised the tree outside our front door area, which is sort of to the side of the house, fell and hit the roof, and it was all up against the stairwell. Fortunately, no damage. But yeah, the movie got a little bit too real then, so we thought that's not a good idea, tempting the gods. Moved on. But yeah, certainly once that happened, it was a couple of hours of just your normal, I guess, windy night, a stormy night, and nothing of major concern. All the lightning and thunder was going on whilst I was out to sea, but as it approached Darwin, all that stopped. And it wasn't really till today, this afternoon or Sunday, that we got a bunch of, or a few scores of thunder from the tail end of the lightning, the cyclone system, and a bit of lightning, but not a lot. Not like it was showing up on the radar to begin with. So yeah, it's quite fascinating. So yeah, it's moving out to the west, as I said, and all should be well. But as far as the impacts go on the aviation sector, as I said, there was basically two lines of thought. Do we keep our aeroplanes here or do we relocate them? Now, in Marcus, some operators elected to leave the aircraft behind. And as it turned out, that wasn't as good a decision. Aircraft broke free or weren't secured properly, ran into other aeroplanes, and obviously a lot of damage was done. So this time, about half the operators elected to relocate their aircraft down to Tyndall. And if you're watching on the story, you would have seen the conga line of aeroplanes heading down there. And I think I got a little bit chaotic separating themselves and getting them all in. But they all landed. And again, it was well outside the storm area. And a few people were wondering, well, where were they going to park? Well, they effectively parked on the runway area. That's not being in use at the moment due to all the works down there. So all the aircraft are all set up there, and all the guys had a nice little weekend down in Catherine, and I don't know if they all made it back yet, but if not, they'll be back on Monday as you're listening to this for operations to resume. So what the advantages of that obviously are the aircraft's going to be safe from ground damage, wind damage, debris, all that sort of stuff flying around. And you avoid well, what if it does? What if it doesn't? It's a cost, of course. You got to pay for the aircraft to get down there. You're tying up crew and salaries and that sort of thing, and you don't have everybody where you potentially need them to be. But again, I think everyone would understand for a short period, and if the cyclone was going to move out to sea or get cancelled altogether, then you'd be able to move everything back pretty quick. It's only a 40-odd minute flight or 45 minutes an hour away, all said and done, depending on what you're flying. So I think everyone probably made a good decision there because, again, everything was out of the way. But everyone did all right with leaving their aircraft at the airport too. Does that mean that was the right decision or not? Who knows, right? But I just think, aircraft are insured, but what are you going to buy with the money? There's not not a lot of replacement options out there of the kind of aircraft that are up here to easily replace them with, and it's going to have a big impact on your bottom line. But the decision of when to relocate the aircraft, obviously there's a point where that's no longer an option, and that was getting to the point certainly when everyone woke up to the news it was potentially going to be Cat 3. Had to make a decision pretty quick as to whether they're going to move. Air North moved all their jets. All the other operators moved their aircraft to Alice Springs. So they were well out of the way, again, because there's no real facilities at Tyndall to do so. But leaving your aircraft behind, you are really completely reliant on the angle of the wind that approaches your aircraft, the tie downs, the anchor points, and your control locks and everything else. So normally after an event like this, the aircraft would get a bit of an inspection, just have a look, make sure there's no obvious damage. I know one or two did pull one or two tie downs loose and ripped out the ring, maybe a little bit of damage there, but again, nothing huge. But what do you guys use for your tie downs? I'm interested because I've been around a few airports and it is interesting to see the tie downs that are selected and relied upon. Rope is obviously probably the the OG. It's been used for decades, very effective, especially if you use the right kind of rope. You don't want to be using some types of rope, that's for sure, like the so I've forgotten the name of it now, the sisal kind of ropes and that sort of thing. But good mountain climbing kind of rope, rock climbing rope that has some shock absorption. It's flexible, but again, all rope, one of the big things is it can obviously stretch a bit and it weakens under the UV. You don't want ones full of elastic because that's not going to help either, but just a good, strong rope that's going to last in the weather conditions and needs to be replaced. That's the other thing as well. You got to keep an eye on it. Make sure it's replaced. You can use ratchet straps. A lot of operators up here use ratchet straps. So between that and rope, probably the best options. But again, ratchet straps tend to start to seize and get rusty. They are also good that they tension up nicely. If you've got crap rope tying skills, well, it's going to be a problem as well. But they're easy to attach and put on with the hooks and everything else. But do need to be mindful. There's some cheap ones that will deteriorate and the mechanism can fail, which of course then means the threading just pulls through and not going to help. What I do see around sometimes though are chains, which I generally wouldn't recommend. Some are left a little bit loose, but the problem with chains is they obviously aren't flexible. So they have no shock absorption at all. And if they're put on too tight, the wing flapping around in the wind will pull on the chain and shudder a bit, if you like, for lack of a bit of a term, and can easily transfer into the wing airframe, pull out tire rings and that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of chains, but what are your guys' thoughts? Love to hear your thoughts. You can message me or put them in the comments section of Spotify at least, and on YouTube there if you're listening as well. All right, so chains are great for securing ground equipment and everything else, but I wouldn't say they're the best thing for aeroplanes, and I certainly haven't seen any used around the Darwin area. So, Cyclone Fina, there you go. Very early. I think it's the second earliest cyclone in the cyclone season. I think the other one was about 7th or 8th of November, about 20 years ago or something. But otherwise, quite an early system. So it gave everybody a bit of a wake-up call, and it was certainly an interesting experience and gave me a lot better idea on some things we could do to better prepare. Again, power generation, I'm still sitting on the fence. It's one thing to get a generator, but then to get a generator that's going to run the house, again, not going to run everything, but run enough power supply for how long. You know, you're dealing with a 6 to 10 kVA generator, which is going to cost, a few grand. And then what are you going to do with it the rest of the time and maintain it? Because as with any emergency generator, it's all well and good to have it, but if you don't maintain it and it's not going to do its job when you need it, then it's absolutely useless. So there's definitely that. But as far as the house prep and food, water, supplies, all that sort of stuff, we had everything we needed. We're all bunkered down, stayed off the roads, and we got through it. But very interesting watching the weather patterns. Keep an eye on the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean with what's going on there. If you don't understand or haven't looked at it, check out the Indian Ocean dipole and La Nina and El Nino. Definitely worth looking into because it does affect the whole of Australia. Bringing down that tropical moisture and our monsoon is then pushes moisture down. Otherwise, it tends to get drier, which creates drier conditions down south, which is where all the summer bushfires get really, really bad. So definitely worth having a look at if you're interested in Met. really quite fascinating. And I have talked about that several times in the wet season seminars in the YouTube channel, and also in the wet season podcast I did a while ago. All right, guys. Well, that is it for this week. I will get back to some of the other questions from the Ask Me Anything sort of video I did last week. Obviously, Fina's taken priority, but I will happily cover off the few more topics there. And for everyone that just sent a thanks for commenting on their question, thank you. You're very welcome. Again, guys, this podcast is here for you. This is here for me to share my knowledge and a little bit of wisdom, or the knowledge and wisdom of others. And we're all in this together. So please, please, please share the podcast with your friends. Tell all your flying mates. They get emails of people who wish they knew about it sooner. So please continue to spread the good word. Please, if you're on Apple Podcast listening, jump on there, log in, and leave a 5-star review and leave me a little comment. If you're not listening on Apple, you can still do the same. You can do it on Spotify. You can do it on YouTube as well. It all helps with the visibility of the podcast and others to find it easily. And remember as well, you can, for the most part, search the podcast. If you just put in what you're looking for in Spotify, I've keyworded most of the episodes, so it should come up. Apple doesn't seem to be as good at it, but I'll try and work on that a bit more. And I'm trying to work on a bit of a list that I'll eventually add to the website, which again is just a landing page, guys. I know some of you said, oh, they clicked on it, doesn't work yet, because I haven't got that far. I just keep running out of bloody time. But I will try and put a list up very soon of all the episodes in topics, so you can sort of find more easily what you are after. All right. Thank you for those that came on board with Patreon and took advantage of it. If you'd like to come on board and support me there, you can do. And maybe I'll just do a quick little, I don't know, I haven't got anything to sell for Black Friday, but I could do a Black Friday sale again on Patreon memberships. So if you want to do that, let me know and I'll sort that out for you as well. I'll make the code Black Friday, and we'll do it to the end of November. How's that? There you go. I'll sort it out in a minute. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic week. And until next time, stay safe, blue skies, and remember the golden rule. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Cheers, everyone.